I've always tried to be involved with some kind of rough idea, and, what I call finding some terms. And they are rich enough of their own that they will allow for all sorts of variations and mutations. And then the idea is simply to go out and see what those mutations can really be. Every moment is changing, and something that we can't see in this moment, we may be able to see in another moment. Years of working photographically have proven that to me. Is that, there is so much out there that we don't see. Well, as I said, when I came to Philadelphia, I was really interested in ideas. And there's a whole progression of things I was doing, questions I was entertaining. And one of my concerns at that time was why we are constantly looking at small handheld photographs, why photographs never, went to the wall, or why they never became kind of a larger viewing experience. So what I like to say is the key to the whole work was buying a table saw, a radial saw. And because I was interested in building my own frames and kind of working out the hangings of photographs. But also at the same time in the work, I was going from the single image to the double image, and then I began to think in terms of the flow of the film, and as a roll of film being one negative. And then as I started seeing those elongated prints, I knew that I'd have to somehow expand that. And that's when I began, stacking them, so to say.
It's interesting to me how it's a lot like music, the composites, to me.
Well, I was listening to a lot of music then, and particularly percussion. That was very important to me, and it's, just the way of influences or of affinities. In those days, I've always listened to a lot of music. In those days, the emphasis was on percussive and a lot of modern music. At that time, I discovered the Shostakovich quartets, and they just knocked me out. And that was something, I just would listen to them and was completely taken by them. And when I would try and share my enthusiasm with other people, they say, Shostakovich, it's like he had the plague, or I had the plague or something, but I wasn't getting much support. And then recently I got this book, one of these disc guides, and I was surprised to read in there that Shostakovich quartets are probably some of the supreme music of the 20th century. They're wonderful. I think what always attracts me to Cezanne and what I value most in him, it was just the way he went about doing his work. And he seemed to be somebody who just went out regularly and sort of he loved, I assume he loved his surroundings, and he just kept seeing more and more kind of problems, things to do with his painting process. And he wasn't living the fancy Parisian life. He basically quietly went around about his own business. And then he evidently had some kind of vision, because he could stick with it. And I think that's about as good an example as you can have. You know, when you do this, you can see the coffee bubbling up almost as a volcano-like. And so it is with our own past. It is a labor in vain to attempt to recapture it. All the efforts of our intellect must prove futile. The past is hidden somewhere outside the realm, beyond the reach of intellect, in some material object, or in the sensation which that material object will give us, which we do not suspect. And as for that object, it depends on chance whether we come upon it or not before we ourselves must die. I put down my cup and examine my own mind. It is for it to discover the truth, but how? What an abyss of uncertainty whenever the mind feels that some part of it has strayed beyond its own borders. When it, the seeker, is at once the dark region through which it must go seeking, which all its equipment will avail but nothing. Seek, more than that, create. It is face to face with something which does not so far exist, to which it can give reality and substance, which it alone can bring into the light of day. Ordering and then reordering, selecting again, putting away, reselecting,
out into the world.
Out into the world, right. And since I'm dealing exclusively in limited editions, this is the record of how many prints are out versus the size of the edition.
How did you pick some are 10, 20, 25?
Oh, that was whimsy. The first one we did the other day, we set at 19. Some we did at 13. And,
now that one's 30, the Mykonos.
yeah. Larry was wise in determining that number, large. It turns out there were a number of prints that I gave away in that series. And that's thought of as one of the stronger pictures. When all of a sudden I heard a boat whistle, well, the town is small enough so that I knew about where I was in relation to the inlet. And I knew the path of the boat. And so I, just hoped for the best and kept my eye peeled for the boat to appear on the horizon when there it was. And I guess I just had, I was able to get off 2 shots. I mean, that's serendipity. There's so many things that are very solid in that photograph and loom large, and then you have that little boat. It's so unexpected. In many ways, I'd have to say, I'm not sure, positively where my strengths are. I'd like to think that the humanism, that feeling for people and their plight is there and very important. But I'm also involved with a lot of other things in the process, and sometimes it's very hard to judge the emphasis. And of course, whatever my work is, what I've done in my work, that's already colored by the choices that other people make over it. And I guess one recognizes that there's always a tendency to try and make facile categorizations, and to try and pigeonhole somebody, and it's this or it's that. And I've always felt that my concerns always went beyond any one particular category. Well, I think particularly with the landscape pictures now, they seem more ethereal, and they seem to be less of worldly substance and alluding to something else, whether that something else is related to some of Blake's imagery, whether it's undoubtedly of spiritual terms, and somehow it seems that there is a direction to it, and it seems possible to clarify that over time. In many ways, it is the miracle. We're in that season when it seems like every moment is just pregnant with excitement, and that brings a change over me. And it's happened. I mean, I have recall of that same experience. Like the first time I went to Greece, And the moment I got up in the morning, I'd have to go outside and just take a view from the veranda. And then I'd go in and I'd start making coffee. I'd put the water on to boil. And as soon as it was on the stove, I'd go out and check it. You know, as if some great change was going to occur. But it was just that I've got to see this thing. I've got to know everything about it. When I drove out here, there's one point coming over the West Virginia border, and I saw some of these woods, and I thought, oh God, I better stop, you know, and photograph these. As if I thought it was a rare occurrence. And now here we are, and we're loaded with this. Doesn't sound like spring, does it, with all these dried leaves? When the air was very still and they were hanging down, it just didn't work. But as I was walking by, there just happened to be a breeze, and I saw that little effect. So I thought, well, I'll stop and try and get that. And then, of course, after I set up, the wind didn't seem as strong. But, you know, it's a possibility. So I pursued it. But actually, you know, I had photographed my mascot over there, and then I was walking over to this one. When out of the corner of my eye, I saw those leaves blowing, and I said, hey, you know, might as well try it. You know, a couple days ago, I was so upset with all the blackness of these branches. But now, once the white is out, you know, there's just a terrific range. Now I'm thankful they're as black as they are. To what degree am I seeing the finished picture when I'm out there in the field making an exposure? And I say, no, that's a separate activity. And the judging goes on later in the darkroom and when you're making the prints. But I think we just kind of fell backwards into this a nice notion of the components or the different concerns out of which work is created. And there's something that provokes, you know, the provocateur. There's that stimulus being provoked. And in the end, there's judging. And in between, well, we say the idiot, but others might say the child is at play. So there's a real kind of, that's the area of license, where you can do anything, try anything, and just keep all the doors open. You don't know what's down the road. You don't know what the next thing that you're going to do. And you don't know, you know, what that emphasis will be. You know, like I talk about a series I would love to do with fathers and their babies. You know, where those two are together in intermingling. Somehow, you know, I haven't found the situation. I'm not writing that situation where, bingo, it starts to happen. You know, it might be the finest thing that I could ever do, and yet maybe I will never do it. That's fate. You know, that something else intervenes, something takes my attention, I go off someplace, get involved, and this other series never materializes. Although I can see it happening. I know it could happen in the way that I respond when I'm walking down the street and seeing that subject matter in front of me. But I'm just not in the circumstances where it can happen. I can't converse about it. And it's always been, in many ways, I guess it's my secret, you know, about that's my feeling, and that's where I'm sensitized. From my journal, the quote from Rilke's letters on Cézanne, where it says, "The further one goes, the more private, the more personal, the more singular an experience becomes. But now, this is the one that we must pay attention to. All talk is misunderstanding. Insight is only within the work."